So, hi everyone, my name is Ashleigh Alderslade and I'm one of the editors at Oxford Languages. Welcome to this tour of the Oxford Spanish Dictionary online and our premium website. You might think it's obvious how to use the dictionary, you just type in a word and you find its translations, but some entries contain a lot of really useful information and different features, so I'm going to show you how to understand them and get the most from them. So once I've entered the website and clicked on Spanish, you can see that you can search in either the English to Spanish side or the Spanish to English side of the dictionary. You can also search in the Spanish monolingual, but we'll come to that later. So I'm going to search for a head word, which is to say the word that the entry is all about, which in this case is go. And in the entry, you can see, first of all, that there is audio on the head words here and on the Spanish translations. So anything with a little speaker symbol. So you can click on the speaker to hear the word spoken aloud. If I click on ear to go to the Spanish side, you can see there's also audio on Spanish head words and on the Spanish examples. So if I go back to go, for the English, you can see that we have British English and American English pronunciations, and we also have IPA for the pronunciations for the head words. And you can click on these, you can see they're hyperlinked, you can click on them for help understanding the IPA symbols if you need them. And for the Spanish, you can see that you can choose either European Spanish or Latin American Spanish pronunciations for the translations. So in this entry Go, you can see that there are different sections for different parts of speech separated by a black line. So here at the start, we have a black line, we have intransitive verb. And if you scroll right down this long entry, you can see we then have transitive verb, auxiliary verb, noun, and adjective. And we also have useful inflectional information provided after the part of speech. So on the English side of entries, we give inflections like these ones for irregular past tenses, past participles, present tenses, present participles of verbs. So here you can see we have the third person singular present goes, past tense went, past participle gone. So we've just given the irregular ones there. We haven't given the regular present participle, for example, because going is regular. You just add in like normal English verbs. And if we go to a noun like dear, you can see we also give irregular plurals of nouns. And on the Spanish side, we give feminine forms of adjectives, like you can see here, feminine forms of nouns, like you see here, and irregular plurals of nouns, which are especially common for borrowings from English and other languages. So now let's look at senses in an entry. So as you can see, this entry alarm has numbered sections, which we call senses. So 1 here, 2, 2.1, 2.2, which are different meanings of the word that may or may not require different translations. But these sense indicators that you see in brackets here help you to know that you're translating the right meaning. So if by alarm you mean apprehension, you would use the translation gran preocupación or gran inquietud. But if you meant warning or also device, you would use the translations alarma. Often senses contain example phrases, like you see here, for structures that are either very typical or in most cases, when you would need a different translation from the main translation for the sense. So, for example, here, he fled in alarm, huyó asustado. You are not using either of these two main translations. It's a completely different translation for alarm, because in this usage of alarm, even though it still means apprehension, you just wouldn't use these translations. It's much more normal to use this one, so we've provided it. And you can see here with the blue words that are hyperlinked, you can click the blue translations to see the entry in the other side of the dictionary where that blue word or phrase is the head word, or sometimes also if it's an example. Another useful thing in senses, for nouns, when we give the translations, you can see that we always give the gender in brackets after the noun. So here, gatto masculine, gatta feminine, felino masculine. Yeah. If you search for a compound noun like action point, you can see that the gender is given for the main noun in the compound. Here it's masculine for punto. So here it doesn't matter that acción is feminine. If you needed to add, for example, an adjective to describe the action point in Spanish, the adjective would be singular and masculine to match punto. And next, if we look at haggis, some words have no equivalent in the target language because they're culturally specific. They just don't exist in the target culture. So for these, we can't give translations because there isn't one. So we give glosses, which are basically a short definition in the target language explaining what the word means. So here you can see it in italics. And if I search for callo plantar in the Spanish to English side, sometimes there's no exact equivalent word in the target language that gives the full meaning of the source language word. But there is a word that usually works in most cases. So, for example, callo plantar, there's no specific term in English for a callus on the bottom of your foot. So in English, we would normally just say callus and then specify that it's on your foot if it wasn't already clear from the context. So for these, we give the English translation that you would normally use in that situation, but then we do give a bit of extra information in brackets afterwards, as you see here, so that you know that this word is more specific than the English and that you understand the full meaning, but you can give this extra information if you need to. So for example, if you showed someone your foot, you would just need to say, look, I have a callus, and you wouldn't need to be more specific, but in other cases you might. And if something is specific to a country or culture, so there's no exact equivalent in the target language, but there is something that fulfills the same purpose in the other language, we've given this as a translation so that you can understand what it means, but we've added a squiggly equal sign before the translation to show that this is an approximate translation. So if you see this squiggly equal sign, that's what it means. Now in the entry strong, in this entry you can see that within each sense there are a series of words in grey brackets before each translation. These are collocates, which means they are words that go together frequently with the head word in a sentence. So these are given when a word has the same meaning but different translations depending which word goes with it. If you want to talk about something being strong, meaning physically powerful, if you were talking about a person being physically powerful, you would say fuerte, but if you were talking about eyesight, even though it's the same meaning, you would use bueno. For verbs, we have the same thing. So in this entry, acknowledge, you can see that for verbs, we give collocate subjects and collocate objects. So a subject is the thing doing the action of the verb in a sentence, and the object is the thing being acted on. So for example, in the sentence, the cat eats the grass, the cat is the subject doing the action, and the grass is the object being acted on. So here in this entry, we have some collocate objects. So if by acknowledge you mean admit, it's sense 1. And if you're acknowledging a mistake or a failure or a fault, it's either admitir or reconocer. But if you mean recognize, if you're acknowledging an achievement or an authority, it's reconocer. But if it's a quotation, then it would be hacer mención de. Next, for conjunctions, something that I find really useful is that different senses in the dictionary tell you if you need to follow them with the subjunctive or the indicative, which is really useful. So for aunque, if you mean although, you need the indicative. But if you mean even if, you would use the subjunctive. And you can find lots of other helpful grammatical information like this in other entries. So for example, if we look at the entry abrigado, you can see that for certain adjectives where it's relevant, we tell you if you need to use ser or estar in different senses. And for English, we also tell you whether something is predicative or attributive. So if we look at the entry ablaze, it's predicative. So that means that you can say that something is ablaze, but not an ablaze thing. And now, things that are really important in the dictionary entry are labels. And we have 3 types of labels in the dictionary. So if I go to the entry damsel, here we have examples of register labels. So register labels tell you what kind of language this word is used in. For example, vulgar or offensive, or in this case, archaic or literary. So in some contexts, it's archaic, so it's a word that's not used in normal conversation anymore, but it's still useful to have it in a dictionary as you're likely to find it in old books. And in other contexts, it's literary, so it's a word used in literary texts like literature and poems and still used in literary texts today. However, if you look at the idiom section, you can see we have the idiom a damsel in distress. And that is labeled as humorous, so it's used in everyday speech nowadays, but in a jokey way. And you can see in these cases, there are also labels to the right of each translation, which show you that in this case, the Spanish translations are used in the same way as the English. And if we go to Stroller, you can see that next on our list of label types, we have region labels. So here in sense 2, we have a US for the sense pushchair. So these labels show where this word, or in this case, this sense of a word, is used. And you can see that on translations as well. So this translation you can see is used in Mexico. And sometimes if we go to noise cancelling, when there are 2 spelling options, the label tells you where this spelling is used. So noise cancelling with 1 L is used in the US, and noise cancelling with 2 L's is British. And in this dictionary, when spelling changes between regions, we give US English for the main head word and British English for the variant straight after it. And finally, if we go to antiviral, we have field or domain labels, which show you what area of language or what subject area it's used in. So here, this word is used in medicine. And like in noise cancelling, you can see that here again, there's another variant in this entry. So these variants show different spellings or forms of head words. And they're sometimes regional, like noise cancelling, if they have a label, and sometimes, like in this case, they're not regional. And they can be at head word level, like this one. So it's right next to the main head word. And that means that it's relevant for the whole entry, or they can be at sense or part of speech level if the spelling or the form only works with certain meanings. So, for example, if I go to almond, you can see that sense 2 says also almond tree. So at sense level, this at sense level, this also shows that this sense is translating almond, which is the head word, or almond tree. So the next thing to talk about is homographs. So sometimes if you look up a word, you'll see numbers in circles at the very top of the screen, like here. These are for homographs, which are words which have the same spelling, but different etymologies, so different origins. These have separate entries, but on the same page. So you can scroll down to get to the different entries, or you can click on the circles. And you can also hover over the circles for an idea of the different meanings before you click on them. We also have what we call near homographs, which have the same spelling, but different capitalization or diacritics, like cat lowercase here and cat in block capitals here. Also things like rose and rose, where they have different diacritics. And things like Polish and Polish. And you may have noticed as we've been scrolling down different entries that some entries have different sections in them. So let's look at those. So if we jump to jump, if you scroll down past the main part of the entry, you can see that we have a phrasal verb section. This is just something that's in the English to Spanish side and not the Spanish to English side, because English has phrasal verbs. And these are great because they have different senses in them, like the main part of the entry, but they also show sentence structuring so that you can see when you're using this phrasal verb where the object goes. So for example, in jump on, it says verb plus adverb plus object, so you know that the object goes at the end. So you can jump on something, but you can't jump something on. And in both sides of the dictionary, you have idiom sections, like we have here. And also my favorite entry, cat. So scroll down to the idiom section. So idioms are structures that usually have a non-literal meaning. So they can't be translated or understood word for word, or they wouldn't make any sense. So if we look at to rain cats and dogs, you can see that the translations here don't mention cats or dogs at all, but the translation still gives the same meaning across, because when it's raining cats and dogs, there are no cats and dogs flying through the air. And if you click on the blue ones, again, like in the main part of the entry, it will take you to the equivalent in the Spanish to English side of the dictionary. Now, as you will have seen at the beginning, there's an option for Spanish at the top. And if you click on this and search for a Spanish word, like palabra, it will give you a Spanish monolingual entry with clearly worded Spanish definitions and useful example sentences. So for Spanish speakers, this is a great monolingual dictionary for you, and for Spanish learners, it's also useful if you feel like you need a bit more information about the nuance of a word's meaning and also some more examples of how it's used. And you can see that there are several senses with definitions and examples, and sometimes even synonyms. And there's also a compound section and idioms in this phrases bit towards the end of the entry. So I think we've covered the main features of entry, so let's talk a bit about searching. So as you've seen, we search for a head word at the top in this box, and you can switch language with these buttons. Or if the word you're looking up only exists in one language, you can search without changing sides and it will find it. So, for example, if you're in the Spanish-English side and you search for the English word be, it would take you to the Spanish-English entry for be, Spanish word. So you would need to switch here to English to Spanish to find the English word. But if you were looking for something like laugh and you had been in the Spanish-English side, it would take you straight to the English-Spanish laugh because there's no Spanish word with that string of letters. You can also search for any string in the dictionary, and if it's there anywhere in the entry, it will find it. So if I look up tengo hambre, you can see it's highlighted it here in the entry, hambre. And for idioms, you can search for keywords. So if I search rain, cats, dogs, because I don't know exactly how it might be worded in the dictionary, I can search for it and it will still find it and take you straight to it. And it just shows you the idiom itself, but you can also click there to get the full entry. You could also type with a spelling mistake and it'll give you suggestions. So if I've accidentally put a mistake there, it'll suggest me cat, cats, cab. And something that I find really useful is the Spanish verb conjugations. So if I search for a verb like tener and scroll to the bottom of the screen, you can see a section that says, see how the verb tener works. And if I click on it, I'll be taken to a full list of conjugations. Because this is a very irregular verb, it's given me all of the conjugations for that verb. And if I search for a regular verb like comer, it'll take you to a page with the list of conjugation patterns for that verb. So comer conjugates the same way as meter. So you can see these bits on the end are the same ones added to comer to conjugate that. And if I go back to the Spanish homepage and click grammar, you'll see there's useful grammar and usage notes on particular areas. For example, there are sample letters and information on spelling. So you can see here there are lots of different topics. And if I click on grammar glossary in English, for example, you can see that there's an explanation of grammatical terms that you might find in the dictionary. So if I scroll down here, you can see predicative that I mentioned before. So I think I'll leave it there for now. I think I've covered the most important features and I hope you find it useful, and thank you for watching.